You're listening to the Roundup Podcast, a podcast on reaching the college campus, developing leaders, and sending out kingdom multipliers. This podcast is created by the Southern Baptists of Texas Convention and provided through cooperative program giving.
Howdy, friends, and welcome to the Roundup Podcast. I am your host, Mitch Tidwell, and I have with me today my co-host, Kylie Badgley. Kylie, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. Just making it through the morning.
Yeah, good to have you today. Hey, today we're on the podcast with Mitchell Johnson, who is the Director of College at Austin Stone, and Justin Smith, who is a minister to college students at Columbus Avenue Baptist Church. I'm asking each of these guys today, or we're asking each of these guys today on the podcast to talk about college ministry in light of the racial tension that we see in our country today, which is extremely high right now. There's been a lot of talk about COVID-19 and how it's forcing a new normal in ministries, but there's also a new normal coming with the growing awareness of racial injustices in our country, particularly towards Black people. It's safe to say that in light of recent events, there's going to be a change, and honestly, there really should be a change. And so let's jump in today. Mitchell, Justin, how are you guys doing?
I'm all right, man. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, for real. Thanks for having us, Mitch. Super glad to be here.
Man, you guys are awesome. We had a podcast last week with both of you guys, and it was wonderful. And I wanted to just almost really just extend that conversation today to think about, the future of all this. So before we begin, Mitchell, we'll start with you. Why don't you give us a little bit of synopsis about yourself, and so our audience can get to know you, even though you've already been on the podcast once, but let's get a synopsis.
Yeah, so my name is Mitchell Johnson. I currently serve as the college director of the Austin Stone. So we have a ministry in Austin, Texas, to Austin area colleges, including UT and some other ones in the area. And I was most recently, before this job, in Lubbock at Redeemer Church as a college pastor there. But yeah, I'm loving Austin. Just here chilling right now. COVID-19 just kind of set up shop in my room. But yeah, I've known Mitch for several years now, so it's always fun to just kind of chat with him. But yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being. Hey, and you, by the way, is Austin still like completely locked down, like no restaurants open, nothing like that?
Oh no, restaurants are definitely open.
Oh, okay.
So Austin's not on lockdown anymore. I think that happened on June 1st.
Okay. Nice, man. Sweet. Justin, tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Yeah, so I'm Justin Smith. I am married, been married for 6 years, and I've got a 1-year-old son named Shepherd, and I am the college minister at Columbus Avenue Baptist Church in Waco, Texas. We primarily reach out to students at Baylor University. I've been the college pastor for 3 years now, but we've been here for 6. And yeah, I'm actually in my office right now, which is awesome. I'm loving the fact that I'm not in my room right now, so I'm blessed. But yeah, we're just glad to be doing ministry. Actually, also, this is going to be public by the time I think this airs anyway. And Mitchell, we haven't talked about this, but I do want to talk to you about this. I'm actually going to be joining Redeemer Church's church planting residency in Lubbock at the end of this fall semester. So
wow, that's crazy, man.
Yeah,
so
man.
Cool.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
We haven't announced that to everybody yet, but it will happen.
Well, hey, make sure you let me know so this podcast airs after that.
Dude, just go for it, man. Just go for it.
All right. Sounds good. Well, man, appreciate you guys. Love both of you guys, and man, thanks for being on today. Let's jump in with this first question. And the first question here is, Mitchell, if you can go ahead and answer first for us. But how have these acts of violence against Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, how have they affected you personally, just as a leader in ministry?
Yeah, so I think for me, I think the majority of people who are going to listen to this are white. But being a Black man, I think that I've had a really hard time just with trying to process through all of these different things because I have dual roles in this situation. I'm a Black man, and I'm also a college pastor to a bunch of college students, and I'm also a part of a large church. So I'm feeling all of these tensions. But yeah, so in processing through all of this and how it's affecting me personally, I just think that I've realized how tired I am. I think without all of these different things happening in our culture right now regarding racial injustice, that I'd have a lot more energy, honestly. But man, it's definitely weighed on me a ton uh, because it personally affects me as well. But yeah, I think it's also been just a good wake up call for my white friends
Mm.
that are around me.
Mm.
So I've been encouraged by that for sure. But overall, I've kind of had a hard past few weeks. But yeah, that's honestly where I'm at.
Mitchell, can you just take us a little bit kind of deeper in that of being, because I know that your ministry is predominantly white and Asian, is that correct?
Yeah.
And so, but you do have, so you're kind of a man between two worlds, and seeing how black people are being affected, and but also ministering to primarily an audience that does not look like you. So, how does that just like feel, man? Like, what is that as you're going throughout your day? What's the I don't know if you could even describe it, but would love to understand some more about what goes on in your shoes.
Yeah, I really appreciate you asking that, man. I think for me, this is the first time a lot of our students have had a leader that's Black,
Mm-hmm.
especially like a ministry leader that's Black. And it's been that way even when I was at Redeemer. Like this is the first time that like these white students are having someone in charge of them who's leading them, especially with the scriptures, that's Black. So I think that at least with our students, they have a level of empathy that I think is different from maybe older people in our church, just because they're opting into being a part of a ministry, going to small groups, hearing teaching from a Black man. So I haven't had many problems in the past with students that I'm leading. So even here, I think for the most part, and I might talk a little bit about this later too, but I'm trying to help our white students like um, not skip their own personal repentance of racism and partiality before they talk to their parents and extended family and their friends who are outright racist. So I think also they've been so encouraging to me. I know I always talk about our students, whether I'm on a podcast or whenever people talk to me, but like really we have like some of the best students in the world. And like they texted me, checked on me, like stuff like that. So I think for me that's been super incredible. And we haven't had a ton of pushback as far as like our talk about racial injustices with our students. I think more so where I'm feeling it is being a part of a majority white church in a complex organization like the Austin Stone, who's been doing a great job. And this Sunday, we're going to have like something really awesome happen. And I don't know when this is going to air, so I don't really know how to even say like this Sunday, past Sunday, whatever. But our church is starting to make some really huge steps in the right direction. So yeah, overall, I feel great about like being here and leading my people and helping them understand that it's also about their personal repentance, because I think if your gospel is social justice and social justice isn't a part of the gospel, one of the many aspects of it, if your gospel is social justice, then it's about how you can like tell everyone else that they're wrong, how you can tell everyone else that they need to be like you. So I think it's really helping our students who are now passionate about these things or have been passionate about these things, who are white or who are Asian or who are whatever race they are, like understand that like, hey, like one of the biggest problems, the reason why Jesus had to die also was because of your own sin.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
That's good, man. Thank you for sharing that, Mitchell. Justin, how about yourself, man? How have these acts of violence affected you personally as a leader?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the first thing is just anger, outrage, lament. You see
Mm-hmm.
things. I think Mitchell, you mentioned last time we talked about this about like forcing yourself to watch the videos and stuff of Ahmaud
Mm-hmm.
Arbery and George Floyd and
Mm-hmm.
same watching the videos and just thinking like this should not be, but then absolutely kind of turning inward and thinking, yeah, but like, how do I, number one, contribute to this? And two, addressing my own numbness to this. Like it's, I'm tempted to think, oh, it's just another one of these instances, which is, it's just not okay. That numbness, that, um, uh, getting used to it, I guess, is just not okay, and not letting it be normal. And so repenting of that, repenting of my own biases, and just thinking as a leader. So that's personally, that's like me as a follower of Jesus. Where am I wrong on this? But then also as a leader, questioning, thinking, examining every single part of our ministry, every single thing that I do. How is it that I am leading our ministry to be a ministry that is not just welcoming to people of color or something like that. I'm in a majority white context as well, and but an anti-racist ministry, a college ministry that teaches college students to follow Jesus and to be people who are anti-racist, to be people who fight for social justice, to be people who have diverse tables. Like we teach our students, for example, to have tables open to the world, to bring in and to make disciples. That having diverse tables and stuff like that, thinking about those things, examining every part of my leadership and every part of my ministry, to the point of being tired, being exhausted, but then also repenting again for thinking that I'm tired and thinking that I'm exhausted when Black people have been thinking about this, have been having to deal with these things for hundreds of years. And so yeah, just really trying to sit, to learn, to listen, to read, educate myself, and friends like Mitchell and others here in Waco, and Mitch, you and others just helping me has been I've been very grateful for it. I'm thanking God for the folks that he's put in my life who can help me improve here.
That's good, man. I think I've always thought in light of this, I think I used this term even in our podcast last time, but just really in an awakening, personally, I know for myself. And I think one of the things that is personally as a leader is leaning just more into grace, of realizing where I have fallen short, where I'm moving forward, and realizing how much I need God's grace in the midst of all that, in the midst of, that I think it's easy for us to fall into a pattern of shame and guilt, but realizing that God resurrects, he resurrects, all of us, even in our lost ways. So that's good, Justin.
Yeah. I just couldn't even imagine having to deal with all this, and then on top of that, figure out okay, now what am I going to communicate to everyone and my students? That just seems like another level of confusion and difficulty. But so through this, what have you guys seen, just after these different injustices, what have you seen be exposed in your ministries, or were there any things that maybe surprised you, or things like that?
Mitchell, we can start with you, bro.
Yeah. Man, so I think this question is different for me, because I am Black and I am very aware of these things that have been going on and have been talking about them for a long time. So I think for me, this situation is exposing less of the things, as far as the things that I'm processing for our ministry and our strategy and stuff like that. And that's not to say that our ministry is perfect by any means, but I think that that's one of the benefits, honestly, of being a leader that is Black, is that, especially being part of majority white churches, man, we're already having to assimilate in some ways and even try to understand the culture that we're in. So I think that a big plus is that, man, as a minority, I know how it feels to be the only person that's like me in the room, which is why we've started axioms like no one stands alone, no one sits alone, and things like that. So I think what I've seen exposed in ministries in general and churches in general is just how project-driven ministries and churches truly are, even though we want to say that we're not. Or so we talked about the fact that this is really a discipleship issue, and what I've just thought about recently is that, I've seen churches care a lot more about having maybe bigger buildings or sending more people or discipleship pipelines and worship nights. And I've seen churches and ministries or leaders care more about those things
Mm-hmm.
than caring about actual people made in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes me think about like the whole pipeline, just kind of metaphor that we use a lot to make disciples. And you've heard me talk a lot about like what good is a pipeline if it doesn't have any water? And I think a lot of people are realizing that their like pipelines have been tainted with like muddy water. It's like, yeah, there's people kind of
Mm-hmm.
going through it, but we're actually multiplying people who don't know how to engage in our culture well. They don't know how to engage when things like this come up. And so what good are those pipelines and pipes if the water is terrible? And so we don't want to multiply people who are not like holistic disciples. So I think this is really just showing how our discipleship of our people previous to this moment has been like maybe half baked. And I believe God is really just unveiling all of this stuff. He's really showing all this stuff and giving us an opportunity as the American church to change for the better so that we can make disciples who don't just know how to read the Bible and teach other people how to read the Bible, but also know how to engage like in our culture. Also know how to handle these issues of race. Also know what it means to be separated from your political party. And I think that that's like been a really big thing that I've seen exposed just from feedback from some of my friends who are Black, and some of the things I've seen on social media is that a lot of people haven't been discipled in the type of way to see that like being conservative doesn't mean that you're a Christian. And I think a lot of people who haven't really been discipled into thinking from biblical worldview, they may think that Jesus would vote Republican, or some people might think vote Jesus would vote Democrat, and I don't think he would vote either. I don't know. So that's another conversation for another time.
Next
But I
podcast.
think the point, yeah. Oh yeah.
Hey, well, we're gonna have to get into it because it's an election season at some
Man. And
point. Maybe that's a fall episode.
so yeah, I think that man, this has been in news, but JD Greear is like urging like the SBC to retire the gavel that they use at the conventions because it's named after a former slave holder. I think his name's like John Brodus or something like that. And
John
then
Broadus.
like yeah, and we're seeing all these things like that we've done in the past, and we're having to repent of those things and change those things and fix those pipelines. And hopefully my hope is that like God exposing these things in our ministries would make our ministries better, that we would send better people out to plant churches. So
Yeah. I think the first thing, and I think as a white guy, as a guy who's only led in majority white contexts, I mean, the first thing that this has exposed is just the lack of education that I have on this issue, and the lack of ability, not like lack of talent, but lack of learned ability to lead people regarding race and regarding image of God type theology and stuff like that. So really examining it kind of is exposed, as I've already mentioned, like my own character, my own life. How is it that my students, when they look at me, how is it that I embody somebody worth following in regards to these things? But I think Mitchell's right. I think the strategies, we talk a lot in the college ministry world about pipelines, about reaching students, making disciples, sending people. You know, a lot of people in listening here are in collegiate church planting circles and stuff like that. And we've been thinking now, okay, all of our strategies, we love to have strategy meetings. I love drawing our pipeline on the whiteboard for our people, for our interns and stuff. But now thinking, okay, well, does our pipeline, when we drew that, when we came up with our strategies, did we have people of color in mind, or were we just thinking of the typical white student that we know? Or thinking, you know, when we go through all the details of making people feel welcome on a Sunday morning, we have this, our large gathering is on a Sunday morning. We just call it Avenue. And we've got round tables instead of rows. We've got food. We've got a welcome team. We've gone through a lot to make sure that nobody goes in and out of that room without being said hi to, without meeting someone. But I don't know that we've ever had the discussion, okay, well, what if somebody who is not white walks in? Are they going to feel welcome? And we've had that conversation. I've had that conversation with students where it's like, man, I just walked in and there was 150 white people and I was the only person of color. And so starting to have those conversations of okay, so now our strategy, when we plan, when we think about how it is that we're going to do ministry, how it is that we're going to disciple our people, we're really big on discipling leaders, and we're teaching them how to read their Bible. We're teaching them the story of the Bible. We teach them strategies for how to make disciples, how to do discipleship on a long-term basis, all those things. I don't know that we've ever taught them how to think about racial justice, or we've ever intentionally taught them about how to engage the culture, like Mitchell said. So starting to think, oh, well, how do we add this to our discipleship material? How do we add this to our discipleship strategy? So that that's kind of exposed us a little bit, and I think it's exposed probably most ministers and ministries listening to this. I hope it has. I hope when these things happened that they, like me, had their own students asking, how do we engage this? How are we trying to help our students in our ministry be better on this? And so just being exposed, I think, like Mitchell says, it's going to make us better. Hopefully it does. I think God's revealing to us some places of sin at worst and just complete blindness, which maybe we should call sin as well, in our ministries and our leadership, that I think we just need to really lean into and really tune in and not just wait for this to blow over, because it's not going to. This is going to keep happening. This isn't new. We talked about this before we started recording this, that these 3 murders in George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, I mean, they're not the first 3, and they're not going to be the last 3. This is going to keep coming up, and I think and I hope that we're headed in a new direction. And I think the first part of it is we need to look at our ministries and see, where is it that we're not thinking about people of color? Where is it that we're not teaching our students to engage the culture on this, teaching our people to what kind of person are we trying to replicate? What kind of person are we trying to send out? Are we going to send out more conservative white Christians who are wrong in this issue, or at least ignorant on this issue? Or are we going to send people who are going to be like the J.D. Greers, or be like the people, the Mitchells and the Mitches, the people who are going to be able to lead others on this?
That's good, Justin. I feel like one of the things that I've seen from a statewide level is on the just exposes how narrow our reach really is. And I think what was born out of the seeker-sensitive movement of churches was the homogeneous unit principle. At least I think I'm saying that right. And but it's where we basically just reach people that are just like us, and that's what provides a lot of growth. And, I think what a lot of this does is expose, which is then expose much deeper issues of valuing the image of God, racism, and all those kind of things. So, hey, Mitchell, I want to ask you a question here, and I didn't prep you for this question, so I hope this is okay. But your last 2 ministries have been, and you've been in ministries where basically not the majority don't look like you. Why have you chosen to be in those ministries as a black man? Because I imagine that's probably harder for you than it would be for you to just go be a part of an all-black church.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Honestly, I think my last church, Redeemer, Richard Barnes was my college pastor, and he was the guy who discipled me. So until Richard left, I had been discipled by all black people. So I have that. Like those people just to thank, honestly. And a lot of those people were a part of Redeemer Church. So after Shard left, I became the college pastor there. And that's just where I felt called. And I think that over time, God just unveiled a lot of different reasons why, like, he called me there. I think that Lubbock is definitely a way more conservative town, and I definitely got way more pushback for just talking about race, and even from some students, not necessarily part of our ministry, but a part of other ministries in town, when we would have things like panel discussions or tough topic nights about race. But man, we had some students leave our church who were just like attenders at one point when I went to go talk to a Christian fraternity about race. But then we had a lot of people come to our church because they were like, no one's really talking about this, and we want to know how to engage in these things. And I think that was the first time I was like, okay, like I can be a part of this if there are people that like sense that this is truly like what God's heart is. And I think that there were those people there at Redeemer. There were those students that were like, man, like we want to not just like go through our Bible studies week to week or have our college gatherings and just like that be like all to the Christian life. Like we want to know what it truly means to be discipled and to engage the culture and to be a light in the world. And I think with coming to Austin, I think Austin's just a different beast. I mean, man, like, yeah, like I'm at a majority white church. My context with college ministry, though, does not feel majority white. Honestly, it feels majority Asian. And that has been like incredible for me to even like engage in that culture and really honestly learn from our students who are Asian and kind of feel a part of they kind of feel this tension between being a part of majority culture because they get passed as quote unquote white in like some intellectual spaces and in jobs and how much they make and stuff like that. But then like they've also been discriminated against because of COVID-19 and people calling the coronavirus things like Chinese virus. And so they are in this tension of majority minority culture. And honestly, that's engaging with them, engaging with all of our students has just been refreshing, and they want it. But I think overall with my calling to Austin and the Austin Stone, it was more about the Austin Stone's heart for the city of Austin that really drew me to Austin, and the fact that Houston-Tilston, a historically Black college, Austin's oldest college, is here in town down the street from Austin High, where we have church, and seeing that that's what like our students want, that's what our church wants. So I think that those desires made it easier for me to transition to this role here in Austin. But I think, I mean, Lord willing, like if I go and plant a church somewhere, which is, it may be my hometown, New Orleans or somewhere else, like I hope that it's in a context that's either majority Black or like at least like 30-40%
Yeah.
African American.
Well, man, I hope you plant a church. I just hope it's in Texas. So, hey, next question here. I want to ask you guys is how are you pivoting or thinking about pivoting your ministry and in light of racial injustice? What is your like, and Mitchell, I think you're ahead of the game on this. This is something that's been a passion for you for a long time. But what are the things? And we can start with you, Justin. What are the things that you feel like you're going to start, doing to help lead your ministry to bring awareness to this and also disciple through this?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And we're fresh with this, and so some of these things, in fact, I'd love if some of the things I say, if you're like, hey, I've got a better idea, dude, please, we need the better ideas. I think first, and we do this, we've done it before, and we did it, I want to say this time, that doesn't feel right to say this time, but in light of recent events, we did this, but I'm sure there are some here listening. The first thing I think is to speak up and to say something. If you're a white college pastor or a white pastor, you need to say something, and you will get emails. You will get people who disagree. People will leave your college ministry. They'll leave your church, but you need to say something. I think the ways that I think that's definitely your first step. If you're not there, if you haven't, I think that's your first step. For us, we've said some things. Now we're trying to make our walk match our talk. And so we're thinking, like I mentioned, all of our strategies, our leadership pipeline, our outreach strategies in that first couple of weeks in the fall, our programs, our way our Sunday mornings look and stuff. Are we planning those things? Are we strategizing with people of color in mind? And going way beyond that, because that's simply just thinking, are we welcoming to people of color? But I don't think that's good enough. I think we've got to think, okay, well, how do we go after people of color on campus? And how do we partner with ministries, Black ministries, Asian ministries? How do we partner with those ministries on campus to start to bring the body of Christ together rather than apart around racial lines? And so thinking, we've got a ministry here in Waco called FaceTime with God that is a majority Black ministry, and thinking, okay, we know the leader of that ministry. He's a friend of ours. He's a pastor, a college on staff at the college ministry at another church. How do we get involved with them? How do we help them out? How do we first sit and listen? And then, we've got one of our student leaders as a part of an Asian InterVarsity chapter here at Baylor. And so thinking, okay, well, we've got the natural connection. God has given us that gift because one of our leaders is involved there. So how do we get involved with them? How do we have conversations with them and see how we can reach the students that we aren't reaching? And I think I think too many times this has happened. Like I'm very honest here. Like there have been times where I've thought we could reach this particular affinity group on campus, but this particular affinity group just happens to be majority Black or majority Hispanic or majority Asian or whatever it is. And I'm just not sure if they really care what I have to say, or if they're going to feel welcome, and it's going to expose some things about me and our ministry. And so I'm just not going to engage there. I think that's sin. I think that's disobedience. And so I think we want to make sure that we're trying to reach those parts of campus. We always think Greek life. We always think the different affinity groups on campus. I think you need to start thinking of ethnic groups on campus and thinking where are students that you're turning a blind eye to, and thinking, how do we reach them? Some ways that we're trying to disciple students. One, preaching, man. Like we have a large group gathering. I preach, our staff preaches, all school year, like 30 times a year, and even in the summers too. And honestly, we've never done a series on race. We've actually never done like a talk other than the podcast that we just recorded last week on racial issues. But we have talked about racism quite a bit in the 3 years that I've been here. Not because we planned it as a topical series or something, but because the Bible does. We've talked about race because we've preached through Genesis, and we've talked about race because we preached through Romans, and we've preached through Revelation. And so when we got to Revelation 7, we addressed racism. When Genesis 1, Imago Dei, we addressed racism as an application, as hey, this is why we are anti-racist. Or Revelation 7, this is why we are anti-racist. And so for us, just thinking, how do we preach more about this? But I think for our white preachers listening, maybe you should do a specific series on this, or specific talks on racial justice and reconciliation, but you don't have to talk about race. All you've got to do is preach the Bible, and it comes up, and you just got to make sure that you're not ignoring it. I've heard Romans preached a ton, and it's always, and believe me, the first point of Romans is the gospel message. Absolutely. And we want to walk through Paul's theology of the gospel and how it affects our lives. But it's also a letter written to a church experiencing tension between Jews and Gentile Christians. And so race comes up in Romans. Race is all over Revelation. Race is all over Genesis, all over the Bible story. So preaching on it. One thing we're kicking around is including it in some of the sins that we tend to list with students when we talk about, like, hey, do you struggle with, pornography? Do you struggle with, sex outside of marriage, drinking, getting drunk, drinking out of underage, getting high? We've got this whole list that we make our leaders check off so that we know how to disciple them. Racism is not on the list. Maybe it should be. We're kicking around that idea and thinking, how can we help our students to think about these things and not be a separate issue from discipleship or separate issue from church, but a regular growing in Christ issue. And several other things I think the last thing I want to say, for me, I do ministry at my house. Around my table, there are several students in our ministry who have keys to my home, and it kind of multiplies out from there. Making sure that my table is diverse, making sure that the students who have keys to my house are not just white students, and if nothing else, just so that they can see that they've got Black and Hispanic and Asian and whatever brothers and sisters who are a part of this, who are following Jesus with us, who are making disciples with us on campus, and that'll start to multiply out into the rest of our ministry. So yeah.
That's good, man. Thanks, Justin. Mitchell, I think you have such a unique perspective in that, that you actually have your audience, your ministry is not predominantly white, but it's also Asian as well. So a completely different ethnicity. And I'm sure I'd love to hear what are the things that you've probably already been doing, but what are, even if in light of just the racial tension that we see right now, what are maybe some new things that you're saying, really, hey, we have to adjust here to address something? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah. So yeah, I love what Justin was saying just about the fact that race is in the Bible. You just need to be discipled in a way to like see that that's like an application there. So I think doing those things, we have dripped like that part of God's heart, like in everything that we talk about. If that's a part of scripture, then we're going to talk about it. So I think that there hasn't been much of a pivot, I guess, but if anything, we're learning that we must serve our city better. We went to a march that was put on by the Austin Justice Coalition, and a bunch of our college students showed up. A bunch of our pastors were there, and we marched. And me and one of our other pastors, he's not our only Black elder. We have two Black elders. One is Jimmy, who like does worship and breakaway and stuff. But Andre Gray, he's our South Campus pastor, and me and him march with the Black community of Austin, and like our students like supported us, and they marched like behind with like the rest of like white Austin and every other race, and so I learned from that so much just about the city of Austin. And Austin Justice Coalition in their speeches talk to everyone about the different things that people need to help with in the city of Austin, to make it more equitable towards Black people. So I've been convicted of making even a bigger push to our students to serve and love our city. And so there's some ways that we've been doing that. I mean, we've been working with Preemptive Love and Immigration Coalition, which is helping put up like hand washing sinks and monitor those and clean those and restock those for the homeless community around the city of Austin. So we've been doing that for about a month now. Our entire church has been doing that for about a month now. And with our demographics for homelessness in the city of Austin, I mean, it's a lot of veterans and a lot of Black people. So that's like a prime way that we can have some proximity, people who are very different than us. So continuing to give our students like those opportunities regularly, and not just waiting for some like the one big thing that we do once a semester. And we have a lot of students, like I said earlier, who just advocate for social justice. We want to continue championing that as many times as we can. We want to also point to our greatest advocate, who's Jesus, and his scriptures as a fuel for us, like doing justice and doing good. So yeah, we want to make sure that our students don't miss Jesus. And I would say, like, man, think through I was thinking about this just as you were asking this question. Just like I wish we could write down all of the things that we're willing to literally pivot on, like in our ministry, like with COVID-19, like what were we ready to switch up really aggressively and really fast when things happen in our ministry, whether we gain staff or whether we lose staff, what are the things that we switch up fast? Or there's something else that comes up in culture, like maybe abortion or politics. What are we willing to take off the table to bring that subject on? And like people have a lot of things that they're willing to pivot on, but if this isn't one of them, then I think everyone needs to assess like what are the things that they're aggressive in and why is this not one of them. So those are just kind of my thoughts, and I guess towards like, man, the white pastors and college pastors who are listening, man, they're gonna be a lot of people when you make some changes. There are gonna be a lot of people who send you emails, shoot you DMs, maybe leave your church, maybe say things about you on their social media, and a lot of white people are like, well, like don't bring this in, don't bring politics, don't bring this subject into church. It's because like for white people, churches have been safe places for them, and they've been able to compartmentalize like them as Christians and going to church on Sundays with the rest of their lives. But as Black people, like, man, I can't really compartmentalize my life. Like, I am Black and I am a believer. So know that if you do lose people, you're doing the right thing as far as speaking out into this. I mean, Jesus said hard things all the time. John 6 say, eat my flesh, drink of my blood. And then a bunch of people left because they were like, you're a freaking vampire and this is super weird. And he said those hard things because he knew those people's hearts weren't really in it. But then the 12 were still there. And Jesus asks, why didn't you leave? And Peter responds, because where else will we go? Like, you have the words of eternal life. Like, we literally have nowhere else to go. So when you're saying hard things and people leave, just be encouraged. If what you're saying is biblically true, then man, like that's a thing of honor to do.
That's good, man. I've noticed you brought up the point on, what does it take for a church to pivot? Like, where does it become such a point where they're like, okay, we have to turn? And unfortunately, COVID did this, but I'm not sure this does this. Is it when it affects the wallet? Usually that's when change is affected. And I think we have to get to a place as ministries to realize that, just because the wallet is full doesn't mean ministry is healthy. And a lot of times, money is a hiding place to not change, unfortunately. So that's great, guys.
Yeah, that was really good. Just so much. So, okay, the whenever you're talking about pivoting, I just like hear a lot of people talking about what they're gonna do and how they're pivoting, and how do you keep pivoting from being kind of like or your attempt to pivot to be like a Band-Aid to the problem, instead of, because even you kind of brought this up earlier, Mitchell, of like, we just do a lot of like projects, and it just seems like this could easily be like, okay, we're gonna do this like project to like do, discuss racism for a little bit. And so I would just love to hear your thoughts on that. And just I think there's just several ways that people have good intentions, but it seems like maybe it can come across a little patronizing, maybe like, yeah, we need to help Black people, but like my Black friends that I have, like, they don't need my help. Like, they are creative and like they just need, I don't know, to be empowered. And I was even talking the other day to Mitch about how just like the term diversity and inclusion just seems weird to me, because it seems like inclusion should just be like the standard, and maybe it should be more like diversity and empowerment, and making sure the goal is to like consistently empower people. So
Yeah.
sorry, I know I said a lot. So
No, that's okay. I think there's two things that I want to say. Like, the reality is, for some of our churches, and I was talking to some of the staff at Redeemer about this, is like, the reality is that some of our churches are going to always be majority white. I think that's really important to understand, because if another Black person, another minority, does not join your church after this, it doesn't necessarily mean that you did something wrong. That's not necessarily the gauge. And I want to be careful with saying that. But what I believe is a gauge is that, like, even if not one person like joined your church after you did all these things, but you were still faithful to talking about these things, calling people to repent and read their Bibles, then you're doing the right thing. So making sure that the people in your congregation, the members of your church, the members of your college ministry know that, like, man, if they have all wide circles, like, then that's probably them avoiding people who are different. I think about even people that, like, when we talk about evangelizing, when a lot of times, like, our students will go out and evangelize and they have two bad rhythms towards minorities that I've had to correct as being in college ministry over the years. They either go only for the minorities because they're like, well, they need Jesus. And I tell them that this is probably their subconscious, like, thinking, or they don't go for the minorities because they're scared. And so doing things like that, helping correct their rhythms of life, because that's not a part of a project, that's discipleship towards them as a person. Like, fix your rhythms of life, invite people into your house, like Justin was saying. So I think those things are very true. And I think that if people have Black people in their congregation, they need to listen to them. They can't really necessarily make a plan and see all their blind spots without, like, somebody in their congregation speaking up. And if there aren't Black people in their congregation, they should ask somebody from the outside to come in, a trusted pastor, friend, or whatever. And there's organizations that do this, that work with ministries, that work with churches to make sure that they're working towards being anti-racist. So I would say those things are both true, and that will help lasting change. I also think it's just super important, like, to know that, like, if you're a majority white church, like, that even though, like, it would be incredible if that changed, what really needs to change is your heart. And it needs to start there. And I say this about, like, even our discipleship as college pastors all the time. Even if we did not make one more disciple, would we still be faithful to Jesus? If we never planted that church that we wanted to plant, will we still be faithful to Jesus and in his word, and praying and all these different things? And I think our answers to that, our true answers, can really indicate where our heart lies with God.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay, cool. And then I guess just for both of you, like, what do you think are the what happens, and, like, what are the dangers to ministries if they don't change? If someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, cool, yeah, but I just don't know. Like, what would you say to them?
I think that might be the biggest danger, is that you won't change.
Mm-hmm.
I think I mean, if your ministry is immature on this issue and you choose not to do anything about it, and I could see it, I can feel the temptation to think, well, this is going to be like, the news cycle is going to shift, something's going to happen, and so we're not going to be talking about this anymore, and then we'll be safe. And that's true, that will happen, and you will be, quote unquote, safe, but you will remain immature, and you will remain disobedient, you'll remain ineffective in this issue, which I think is every college minister and pastor's nightmare. And so, yeah, I think if you don't change, then that's exactly what you're going to get. I think you just won't get any change. I think the other thing is that students, the next generation, this coming generation, will notice. They will take note. And I've got students immediately. I think a week went by since, specifically, George Floyd's murder and the video and everything like that. A week went by, and I had students, white students, these are not students of color, white students, texting me asking, when is Columbus Avenue going to speak up on this? When are we going to say something about this? And I was just like, we are. But immediately, and that was encouraging to me, but also eye-opening, in that the next generation of white students, not just students of color, the next generation of white students are going to take note. And so it's very important that if you want to reach them, and that should not be the reason why you want to change. I want to make that clear. Success in ministry should not be the reason why we want to be obedient. But I think, and honestly, I hope it does affect success. I hope the next generation really holds churches accountable. I hope they get on their Instagrams. I hope they get on their websites and they look at their staff pages. I hope they look at what they said, because I think that's going to be helpful. It's a helpful thing that God's bringing to us to help us to change. But definitely, I think the worst nightmare situation is that you just won't change.
That's really good, Justin. Man, I've seen so many people, just kind of push back I've seen even people in ministry push back against, this younger generation because they're trying to hold churches and their ministry and their clergy accountable for what they're saying and what they're doing, as if, we're untouchable to critique from our sheep. Like, and man, I think it's going to take God softening hearts and a lot of humility for us to do things like pivot, for us to be aggressive in making sure that our people in our congregations are the ones speaking up at the Thanksgiving table about, or calling their mom or dad out on their racism, especially if they claim to be Christian. I want like our people to be those people, so that things like Ahmaud Arbery, like just a Black man running who's my age, like, so that like people don't commit things like that. Like I pray that like our churches raise up these people who are just courageous as far as calling out these terrible things and thoughts. And so I think what happens to ministries that don't change, along with everything that Justin said, and I want to be careful just because like what I said earlier, it's about people, not projects, and this can be another project. Like this can turn into another project, and projects don't last, but people do. So, and I know that there are churches and leaders out there that are probably more afraid of people not coming to their church or coming to their college ministry because of their silence on racial injustice than people and leaders in churches actually changing, because this is just God's heart. So yeah, like I see the younger generation just sniffing that out too. It's like, you really just want to change so that you can keep people. You want to change so that like the future of your church is secure, but that's not God's heart. And I think of places like Amos, in Amos 5:21, when God says, I despite your feasts, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the peace offerings of your fattened animals, I will not look upon them. Take away from me the noise of your songs. To the melody of your harps I will not listen, but let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. So I pray that in all of the things that we do to make our churches better and greater in these ways, that like we would just, our desire more than anything else would just to reflect the heart of Jesus, who came from his culture of perfection down to our simple world that we made very terrible. And he lived life with us. He washed our feet. He lived the life that we should have lived, and died on the cross for all of our sins, the sins for all of these sinful people. And man, I pray that we would have that type of heart.
That's good, Mitchell. Man, guys, I appreciate y'all being on and all of this. Just as you said, Mitchell, it's people over projects. And to get to a point where just you love people, it just comes as your heart rooted in the gospel of Jesus, because it just can't help but love people in light of that. And I just think of even in, I know in a lot in Southern Baptist culture, there's a big emphasis on awakening and revival, and perhaps revival comes at the acknowledgement, the repentance, and the lamenting over racism in our body. Perhaps that be the case. So, well, guys, thanks for being on today. We love y'all. Appreciate your honesty in all of this, and it's my prayer that as we move forward, that as Mitchell said, this is not a project, but this is really truly about people and true change in the lives of churches all in college ministries all across Texas. So, thanks for being on, guys, and listeners. Thanks for tuning in. This is the Roundup Podcast. Feel free to subscribe to our podcast, rate it, review it. That's very helpful for us. And follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SBTC Collegiate. We'd love for you to follow us there. And then we have an entire network of collegiate leaders here in Texas, and actually a lot of leaders outside of Texas, in our Roundup Network Facebook page. So jump in there. We'll get you in there. A lot of good resources and collaboration you can do there with leaders. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.